More green jackets have been lost at the 12th than at the Augusta City dry cleaners. Rory McIlroy knows this better than most. But what is Amen Corner and why is it so iconic? The famous sequence has always been there since the Masters began in 1934. It didn't get its name until '58 though, when American sports writer Herbert Warren Wind, on the left, wrote, "At the farthest reach of the Augusta National Course, down in the Amen Corner." He drew inspiration from the 1933 jazz song Shouting in That Amen Corner by the Dorsey Brothers. The reason behind its difficulty is all in the sand and the water. Tournament officials don't even bother to count the balls lost in there each year, such is the sheer number. The 11th, named White Dogwood, is a downhill 520-yard par 4 with a pond to the left of the green and a bunker to the right. Both cause a lot of trouble each year. The 12th, Golden Bell, is perhaps the most famous hole in the world, with danger everywhere. Many aim for the flag, but look, get it even slightly wrong and you're in the azaleas at the back, or the bunkers at the front, or even worse, Rays Creek. Or you can play it safe and aim for the open green on the left. You chicken. Tiger Woods once said, if you make 4 bogeys from Thursday to Sunday, you're doing well. And the highest ever score on that hole? 13. It's a par 3. Tom Weiskopf in 1980 was the sorry soul. Often the iconic Ben Hogan Bridge is the only thing players enjoy about Golden Bell. Even if you escape there unscathed though, you met with Azalea, the dogleg par 5 13th. It tempts players to go for the green in 2, but cut over those trees on the left at your peril. Every year, it seems, Amen Corner destroys someone's dreams. Rory McIlroy dropped 3 shots through here as his round unravelled in 2011. In 2016, a year after navigating Amen Corner expertly, Jordan Spieth shot a quadruple bogey on the 12th to throw away his green jacket. I mean, it sounds like my game, to be honest. So who'll be the next to be brought to their knees, praying for mercy after Amen Corner?
Yeah, welcome one, welcome all to this week's edition of Trans-Europe Express. I'm Danny Kelly. Andy Bressel is here with me for the next 3 hours, taking you right through till 1 o'clock in the morning. And what a show we've got for you. In the week of the international break and the World Cup qualifiers coming from many countries to their crunch, we'll be taking you through all of the results over the last 2 rounds of qualifiers, plus what they mean. It's still many places left open to get. Then we'll take you around the different countries we normally cover, where even though there's been no competitive football, except in France, we'll come on to that, there's amazing stories coming left, right and centre. Tim will join us as always, Tim Vickery from South America, and we should have a belting 3 hours for you. All of it performed from here in the Kilkenny Hills with me, with the hat on the side of the head after the Republic of Ireland's astonishing last-second victory to get themselves through to the playoffs over poor old Hungary and Dominic Szoboszlai, who was absolutely brilliant on the day. We'll cover that much later in the show. Everything coming up about the World Cup and its qualifiers and much else besides. Thank you for joining us here on Trans-Europe Express. Hey Andy, how are you?
Very well, Danny, and you?
Yeah, well, I mean, this afternoon I broke the world over 60s high jump record when the third Ireland goal went in. I haven't leapt so high from a seated position since Lucas Moura in Amsterdam 6 years ago. Turns out I still got amazing spring of a man for my age and upholsteredness, if that's even a word. Yeah, I was very excited. I mean, it was an amazing game of football.
It was.
And some of that has to be down to the crowd in Budapest as well, who were fantastic. And of course, for most of it, thought they were going to get through. I did feel sorry for Dominic Szoboszlai. I'll say it again. It was a performance that reminded me a little bit of Owen Hargreaves against Portugal all those years ago. How can there only be one of him on the pitch since he seems to have the ball every single time? But listen, we're going to start, Andy, with a story that's been breaking over the past 2 weeks and just keeps on accelerating. It's nothing to do with the World Cup, really, and that is the betting scandal in Turkey, where initially a whole raft, hundreds of referees were suspended for having active betting accounts. Then over 1,000 players from the top level right down to the fourth level of Turkish football were also suspended. And now they've been handing out actual bans in varying lengths, some of them almost a year, I think, for just having these accounts. The person who's been helping us get through this for the past few weeks is our Turkish football expert, Çetin Cem Yılmaz. Good evening, Çetin.
Hi, Danny. Hi, Andy.
Listen,
Hello.
thank you for joining us. This story's accelerated again the last few days with actual, not just being suspended, but actual bans being handed out to players. How many players, Çetin, where are they playing, and what are the length of the bans?
Sure. 102 players were suspended, and as you said, from 45 days up to 12 months to varying degrees. The announcement didn't specify which player was involved in how many bets or something like that. Maybe we might hear more about this in the future, but the most interesting names on the list were 2 players from Galatasaray and 2 players from Beşiktaş. The Beşiktaş players were cleared. They were deemed not guilty. And the Galatasaray players, Eren Elmalı, he's also the Turkish national team left back, and he was suspended from the squad as well. He was part of the Turkish squad that was going to play Bulgaria and that's going to play Spain next week. So he's a key player. He was involved in many Champions League games. Right now he is suspended for 45 days, but his betting activity was believed to be from 4 years ago. So it's not relevant to his time at Galatasaray or his former club, Trabzonspor. And this is like the softest bans that we see. So I think it's believed that he was involved in once or twice. So this is one of the softest bans we saw in this list. One of the interesting names, Metehan Baltacı. He's a Galatasaray squad player. He's from the academy. He doesn't get featured in many games, but he's usually part of the squad as a bench player. And I think he has been involved in many betting activities. It's, again, not believed to be linked to match fixing or anything, but the number of bets placed suggests that, he was hit with as I said, 5 players were hit with 12-month bans, 5 players were hit with 9-month bans, and the majority got away with 45 days and 3 months.
And when we talked about this originally, Çetin, when you were on a couple of weeks ago, we talked about at the TFF, the Turkish FA, Ibrahim Hajizmanoglu, the director, sort of saying how he wanted to clean house. So he wanted to look at all the referees, he wanted to look at the players, he wanted to look at the clubs, he wanted to look at themselves, he wanted to look inside the TFF and the people who are on the board there. Given that this has happened and that this whole story has expanded, has that kind of backed his stance that he's originally taken in saying, look, no one can hide here. We have to not bury this and we have to completely clean house?
In one way, yeah, he did what he was going to say he would. He announced his federation moved really swiftly. They moved on really quickly and handed the bans to referees and players. So that's a good thing. But I also have some reservations about the whole process as well. I mean, we have seen huge chunks of information, maybe not information, huge chunks of lists with names and bans and all that, but we don't have many context and details. So we don't know if those players were involved in, Were they just betting on some football games, some sports
Yeah.
games, or were they actually involved in the games that they were playing? We don't know about that. So far, it's not a huge systemic cleansing. It's more like, finding the individuals who were involved in betting. So right now, I'm not sure if that is going to serve as this huge cleanup of Turkish football, but we keep, monitoring the situation. We'll see.
Andy, I know, wants to talk to you, Chetan, about the effect this is having, because, Andy, you want to make a comparison with the betting scandal that is shaking the NBA to its roots.
Well, yeah, I don't know if there is a comparison, really, Chetin, but I know you know North America so well, of course, but there's this huge betting scandal in the NBA at the moment, and it's almost like a jumper. You pull at the thread and more comes away every time. And it feels as if there is a similar thing happening in the Turkish Super League with all these stories that are just expanding all the time. I mean, is this a similar thing that the more we dig into this, the more we're getting more of an understanding of the scale of the problem? Because it feels as if it's something that the more we look at it, the more and more we see.
Yeah, I mean, when you see 100 players were involved in betting, and were they playing, just betting, or were they actual match fixing? We don't know about that, and this is actually that needs to be sorted out. If there was actual match fixing, which was not part of this Turkish Football Federation investigation, but there is an actual legal case going on with the Istanbul Prosecutor's Office as well, and they are alleging that some games were fixed as well. If that's the big thing that we'll see actually, that would be the real deal. If they will conclude that there was match fixing, of course there would be huge implications of that, and so many seasons could be at stake, but we don't know much about that at the moment, and we don't have many evidence to back that up. But I think that how Turkish Football Federation acted, they were like they punished individuals, and they look like closing the case at this point. I might be wrong, there might be more, but so far it looks like this is what we're going to have until the main legal case is concluded, which might also take years.
I was going to say, Chetan, of course, the Turkish FA can move as quickly as it wants. The legal processes in any country, for good reasons, often grind extremely slowly. And we'll see what it takes, how it goes. How are Turkey doing in these World Cup qualifiers, Chetin? Happy?
Yeah, actually quite happy. They did great, apart from the Spain game, which, understandably they were outclassed by Spain, but the result 6-0 at home wasn't that pleasant. I mean, 1-0 or 2-0, no one would be surprised. So Turkey is going to be in the playoffs, barring they beat Spain 7-0 in Spain next week.
Good luck with that.
Ask.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a really good core of young players. I don't know how they will fare in the playoffs, but Arda Güler and Kenan Yıldız, back with the experience of Hakan Çalhanoğlu, there's a really good core there, and there are some issues with the defending as well. The back four is still, under. It's a work in progress, but Turkey really has a great crop of young players, and I think that it would be really exciting if this generation can see the World Cup, because Kenan Yıldız and Arda Güler and Can Uzun from Eintracht Frankfurt, they're all 20 years old, so they might have multiple World Cups, but if they can make the World Cup when they're 21, that would be good. That would be great to see.
I'm very, very sad to hear that Turkey has a load of good young players, Chetin, because I'm looking for an easy opponent for Ireland in the playoffs. I'm just crossing Turkey's name off the list now, having spoken to you. I will talk to other experts during the course of the evening, and I'll be crossing other teams off the list as well. I don't know who I want the Republic to get in these qualifiers. In a qualification tournament, of course, where it's almost impossible, a bit like South America, unless you're really bad, it's very difficult for European teams not to qualify. They've got so many places. in the 48-team World Cup. Our thanks to Çetin Cem Yilmaz, as always, for bringing us up to date with the unfolding drama, if that's the correct word, and it's not, of what's going on in Turkey. Next, we turn to the World Cup qualifiers, and we'll start with the Iberian giants. How's it all going with Spain and Portugal? That's next here on Trans Europe Express with me, Danny Kelly, and him, Andy Brassell. Now listen, the jump season is back on Racing TV and you can enjoy a free month right now. Watch live racing from Cheltenham, Aintree, Punchestown and so much more. Head to racingtv.com/free trial now to get your free month. The jumps look better on Racing TV. And to celebrate, Racing TV is giving away a pair of tickets to the New Year's Day racing at Cheltenham, a 50-inch TV and a 1-year subscription to the channel. Go to talksport.com/win to enter. It's 18 plus, of course, and begambleaware.org. T's and C's apply. Andy, let's talk about Spain and Portugal. First of all, Spain, who are having a quite brilliant... No, actually, let's start with Portugal, Andy, because they won by 9 goals to 1 against Armenia today, and finally having let 2 chances to clinch their qualification for the USA, Mexico and Canada, I've got to think of a better word for that, go by, including a quite mad game in Dublin that I'm happy to go on about for the next hour and a half if you want. They have clinched qualification. And I guess we'll talk about the game in Dublin where some of their shortcomings were perhaps exposed. But today, and I mean, 9 goals even against a team like Armenia, with all due respect, is something else. And no Cristiano Ronaldo, of course, suspended for the game.
Yeah, and before we get to that, actually, I do just want to mention the fact that 2 big games have just finished. Of course, Italy 1, Norway 3.
Wow.
That finished about 25 minutes ago. Huge. Italy winning at half time. Of course, they needed to win. I think they could feel Chetin's vibe heading into that Spain-Turkey game on Tuesday. The fact that if Italy were to have any chance of qualifying automatically, they would.
Andy, I think you're underplaying. Didn't Norway get a 4th in added on time?
Yeah, they did. It's Jurgen Strand Larsen actually, right at the end. But it was really a game that was turned in the second half. 1-0 to Italy at half time. No answer to Norway's performance in the second half, which was brilliant. And seeing them celebrating their first World Cup since '98. We'll talk about that in greater depth later. But yeah, Spain, who I've been saying for a while, I find very hard to find a justification for them not being the favourites going into this World Cup. And they did it again, going to Tbilisi, beating Georgia 4-0. Could have been loads more, even though there was no Lamine Yamal, even though there was no Pedri, even though there was no Rodri. And they make short work of it because they're such an excellent collective with so many players who can just slot in and do a great job. And players who, I guess, in many cases, are not the biggest names in world football.
No.
But they managed to do it anyway. Well,
we'll come on to them. Let's start with Portugal then, because as I say, look, it's really hard to have this conversation about Cristiano Ronaldo because he scores lots of goals for them. But with him up front in Dublin, Ireland found a way to nullify him and eventually get him sent off. And then they don't have him today, and they rattle in 9.
Yeah, and it's funny. I guess their attacking explosiveness was so great, it kind of papered over a few ugly cracks that showed up early on because Renato Vega gave them the lead early on in that game. And then some really shocking defending let Armenia back into it. And there was very much a sense of, here we go again. And then they completely unloaded, really, towards the end of the first half. And then in the second half, too, hat-trick for Bruno Fernandes, hat-trick for João Neves, who really is proving himself one of the best midfielders in the world at the moment. He's playing so well. And such an accomplished finisher as well, which is maybe something that we hadn't seen from him in the past. He scored his second hat-trick of the season, having got one for PSG of the highest quality, as we pointed out last week, against Toulouse earlier this season. I mean, he's only started 4 games in Ligue 1 this season due to injury, João Neves. He's got 8 goals already for club and country, which, considering we don't really think of him as a goal scorer, is pretty extraordinary. But he's someone who, I guess, just seems to score goals as the byproduct of his all-round technical brilliance, really. It seems a bit foolhardy to make some of these predictions given how many options that Roberto Martinez has. But I think you'd be pretty daring to say he's not going to be a starter going into the World Cup. So really, it's not just about a direct replacement for Cristiano Ronaldo. And we know that Gonçalo Ramos can do that. We know he's not going to start for PSG every game between now and the end of the season, which probably helps them in terms of load management, etc. But there are so many ways that Portugal can get you. If they can defend halfway competently, they're a threat. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, the thing was, Andy, in Dublin, Ireland played 3 centre-backs against Cristiano Ronaldo, who is, of course, the greatest headed finisher I've ever seen, and forced Portugal to go wide at the expense of their own pattern, the Republic did, and allowed them to let the crosses come into the box, believing they would beat him in the air again, which they did. And in the end, and of course, it was an important game for Portugal because they could have qualified for the World Cup there.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they ran out of ideas, but
I think it's fair to say they did. I don't think that's unfair at all, Danny. And
they took Haaland's bait. They just kept banging it into the penalty area, and Liam O'Brien and Nathan Collins, etc., and O'Shea just kept heading it away.
I guess this is the issue, really. That it's not Ronaldo's age; it's that his strength is one that everyone's completely aware of, and it's one that weakens Portugal against better sides. I think it's fair to say that's a real problem for them. Whereas you look at that game in Dublin and what could have changed things for them. Well, I think the biggest miss was Nuno Mendes. Well, there's no doubt about that. Who's out injured at the moment. Who's not only, I think before people would have described him as the best attacking left back in the world. But if you look at the goal they conceded against Armenia, where it looked as if Joao Cancelo was tripping over his own shoelaces today. I mean, he's a much better defensive left back than Joao Cancelo is. And I mean that with every bit of respect for what Cancelo has achieved during his career. But Mendes is on a different planet. If we're talking about players that Portugal can't do without, he's right up there.
Yeah, great fun, of course, when Cristiano was doing his crying thing left over from the previous very bad-tempered game in Lisbon.
Yes.
And the red card, the press conferences the day before had been very bitter, both sides accusing each other of trying to influence the referees and all the rest of it. It was one of those games of international football. I mean, I had skin in the game, but you couldn't take your eyes off it because there was so much stuff going on the touchlines, in the technical areas, on the football pitch. We'll talk about that more when I get to Ireland at the end of today's programme. Let's talk about Spain then. As you say, missing real superstars, Pedri, Lamau, Rodri. They went and completed their clean sweep of their qualifiers so far. The thing that strikes me about them, Andy, is that people present them with certain problems, either a lack of players or a problem that occurs in the game, and they always find a solution to it. And this is best illustrated by the fact that they don't have a superstar centre forward, and yet Oyarzabal appears to be really, really good in every single game. So much so that wonders why, and no disrespect to a fantastic club in Real Sociedad, he's still allowed to stay there.
It's a good question for me, Danny. It's got something to do with release clauses. It's got something to do with age as well. 28 now. I think if he was 24, he'd be out the door in a flash. But it's hard to see him moving now. But it's remarkable, isn't it, that there's not more talk about him when you think of this is a guy who steps up to the plate every single time, who's a leader in so many ways, who's the scorer of a winner in a European Championship final, for goodness sakes, lest we forget. This is someone who is big at the big moments all the time. But really, I think the key with Spain and what makes them the favourites for me, I think if you look at this game, it's the midfield. So the starting midfield was of Merino, Zubimendi, and I think those two playing together for Arsenal absolutely helped Spain, by the way, this season. And you add to that Fabian Ruiz. That's a really difficult midfield to argue with. And then you add to that Alex Baena, you add Pablo Barrios, who's really coming on at Atletico Madrid. And the reason maybe that Conor Gallagher's not getting more football as well, and maybe is marginalised in terms of the England squad going into the World Cup next summer. So the options are incredible. And that's before we get to Fermin, one of the best players, one of the best midfield players in Europe, who can't get into their midfield at the moment, despite they've got some really important midfielders, and we didn't even mention Gavi out injured at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the fun starts, isn't it? And we're getting very, it's almost Christmas. We're getting very close to the World Cup. This is where the fun starts, because you go through that and I think, oh my God, Spain must win it. And then, as I will argue in Mbappe watch, I look at France's group of players and I think, no, they must win it. Then I look at what Ancelotti's doing with Brazil, where they've got fountains of forward players, but he's now turned them into a defensively good team. I don't think they've conceded in the last four. I think, oh no, they might win it. This is where we are. And then Harry Kane quite rightly says, after England's clean sweep of their qualifiers, we'll be among the favourites. We just have to accept that. Really, really looking forward to the tournament, as I always do. Listen, thank you very much indeed for all of that, Andy. The teams we're going to talk about next in their World Cup qualifiers are both Germany and Belgium, who are both going to qualify unless something mad happens. But they're not very happy not the best series of performances for them. We'll talk about that next year on Trans Europe Express. Well, we know that England are through, Spain are through, and all, but one or two still got a little bit of work to do. Let's talk about two of those. Both of them wearing a slightly, excuse me, a slightly grumpy face as they head into their final fixtures. Andy, let's talk about Germany first. They only need a point against Slovakia tomorrow. But first of all, let's just remark on how well Slovakia have done, because if it hadn't been for that loss in Belfast, and of course Northern Ireland are pretty stern at home, the crowd really gets into them, they would be the favourites to qualify out this group. As it is, they have to beat Germany tomorrow, and Germany coming off a lacklustre performance against Luxembourg.
Yeah, they're rotten, I thought. Really, really rotten. Now, look, I think this can sometimes happen, and it sometimes has happened under Julian Nagelsmann before in other teams before the Germany job, where he simply wants to monster weaker opposition and puts one too many attacking player in the team. I think he did that using Serge Gnabry as part of a midfield three. And you're going to say, oh, it's only Luxembourg, but you still need shape, you still need form, you still need structure. And it didn't really felt as if Germany had a lot of that to me. The two things that you could say that went well for them is, one, Nick Woltemade scored twice and was really good. And secondly, the strip looked beautiful. Very World Cup 90s vibes, which I think we can all get on board with.
Yeah.
It turns out they could rock that without recalling Lothar Matthäus, which, given his age, is probably a plus. So I think the Woltemade thing is interesting, though, because you're looking at all the issues that Germany have, and to my mind will continue to have in this World Cup, and will stop them being a serious contender. Look, I expect them to get this point off Slovakia tomorrow, though. If they dice with danger, it wouldn't be the first time. Remember that they lost 2-0 in Bratislava, and they were pretty rotten in that game as well. But the discussion with Woltemade has sort of evolved. Now, I think we've seen since he's arrived in the Premier League, he's someone who's very, very adept at dealing with pressure, especially with the fee he came for, given that, he essentially had to chisel himself a place in the Stuttgart team last season. And having done that and doing well in the second half of the season, all of a sudden he's an 80 million euro footballer.
Amazing.
And that's something that really upset people culturally in Germany. Now, look, that may sound ridiculous to Premier League fans who are listening to this and that are used to huge transfer fees, but the idea that this guy came from Werder Bremen, where he wasn't always a starter, to Stuttgart for nothing, and then a year later went for almost like 100 million, if we're adding on all the add-ons and all the rest of it, to a Premier League club, is something that really shocked people, especially as it wasn't, one of the biggest Premier League clubs. So, especially as it wasn't Manchester City or it wasn't Liverpool. For no fault of his own, Woltemade became the target of, I guess, cultural misunderstanding. The fact that is a lot of German football fans see this is everything that is wrong about European football. The fact that clubs can go and spend absolutely insane amounts of money, and it's not about developing players, and it feels further away from them as a fan culture. And it's remarkable because when you bear in mind that in Germany's last home game, Woltemade was booed. Not because of who he is, but because of what he represented or what he was seen to represent by German fan culture. And the fact that he hasn't batted an eyelid, and he's gone out there, scored twice again for the national team. And look, Tim Kleindienst is out injured at the moment, but there's no doubt who will be, barring injury, Germany's starter at the World Cup when they get there, as I believe they will. And that Woltemade has managed that to go from promising young player to this situation around him that's completely out of his control, by the way. He's just kept his head down and got on with it. And the way that he stayed calm and improved all that time is, I think, quite remarkable.
Well, German football culture, which I admire in many, many ways, can't have it both ways. They can't be out celebrating in the Strasse when they spend a shed load of money on a 30-year-old England captain and then cry when one of their best players gets taken to England.
That's the thing. They haven't. The whole relationship with German football and money is really old-fashioned. In fact, it's something that's really perpetuated Harry Kane in Bayern. Every time he's picked up a little injury, like the whole, not just of Bayern culture, but German football culture has gone, oh my God, we spent all this money on this old guy. Never mind the fact that he's absolutely untouchable and he's been the best player in the league since the minute he's arrived, that he's done everything right on and off the field.
And appears to me to be improving.
Yeah, exactly. But culturally, there's still this residual guilt about it that I don't think will ever really go away.
No. Well, if the Germans are slightly miffed because they didn't play very well against Luxembourg, for real misery, you have to turn to Belgium, who, again, I mean, they missed another chance. They've already had one chance to clinch their place at the World Cup. They go to Kazakhstan expecting to clinch that place, and they still not got it over the line. In fact, they were behind in Kazakhstan for a good deal of a 1-1 draw, Andy.
Yeah, they were, and they made it really difficult for themselves. They conceded a bad goal. You had the extraordinary scene of Matt Sells of Nottingham Forest describing at great length to the media afterwards how that goal wasn't his fault. I mean, he shouldn't really have needed to do that because there were 3 defensive mistakes before it, one of which was Arteta's, and also, like, goalkeepers can concede goals at the near post without needing to be publicly feathered and tarred, I think it's fair to say. There was lots else wrong with the Belgian performance. And do you know what? If they'd have just taken their chances, we probably wouldn't even be having this discussion. But at the moment, it's clear that not only is there a sort of uneasy handover of the old guard to the new guard, and some of the new guard aren't available at the moment. Of course, Malik Fofana's out injured till 2026, for example. But it's clear that they're missing Kevin De Bruyne and Romelu Lukaku, not just in a playing sense, but in a leadership sense, which I think has been somewhat overlooked in the past, like how much these guys knit everything together in a cultural dressing room kind of way. And that's a real problem for them. And you know what? It's been a real problem for Rudy Garcia, who made a really good initial impression, who said, look, I'm giving this job everything because when I pack in the Belgium job, that's me. I'm finished coaching football. That's not going to be me anymore. And now there's lots more mutters around him. He seems irritated, unhappy. He was suspended for this game, so he was in the stand looking very, very antsy indeed. And talking of experienced players, for this last game against Liechtenstein, they've lost a couple more. Thibaut Courtois isn't going to be there. Senna Lammens isn't going to be there. So Mike Penders, who is the current goalkeeper for Strasbourg, but of course on loan from Chelsea at the moment, as he would be, he's been called up to the squad. So I'd be interested to see his involvement, if any. The thing is we know what's going to happen. There's one situation in which Belgium can qualify and not be seeded, and that's if North Macedonia and Wales draw and Belgium lose to Liechtenstein. But it's not going to happen. Obviously, it's not going to happen. So really, we don't have any sort of question for this or conclusion beyond, as you say, this is all a bit miserable, isn't it? You know, it's not really achieved anything apart from getting loads of people muttering around the team.
What you say about the last stage of the transition from their golden generation into the team they are now is the sight of Kevin De Bruyne and Lukaku, neither of whom could play in this game. So for me, Andy, it was really interesting that afterwards the internal criticism was led by a very young player in some ways, and that it was Doku who got out his clog. Do Belgians wear clogs? And went for the team and said, this isn't just good. Now, he feels he can do it because he's in great form himself and plays for a really big club at Manchester City. But Jeremy, and I think you told me he did it so everyone could understand he wasn't going to be lost in translation. He did it in Flemish. Yeah. And he really went for the rest of the team. So even the leadership group is changing, isn't it?
Yeah, he refused to do interviews in anything other than Flemish afterwards. So he
couldn't
really
be misunderstood,
Yeah, he really wanted to make a point, it's clear. But I guess because of where they are at the moment, it has been left to someone like Doku to become a leader, but perhaps a little bit prematurely. And perhaps if you've got Lukaku and De Bruyne around you, like irrespective of what they can do on the field these days, I think it takes a little bit of the sting out of that situation. So you need them in the dressing room as much as you need them on the field.
Andy, make a case for me for Germany going deep into the next World Cup.
No, I can't. I really can't. The thing is, I look at that team and I think there's a limited amount you can do to change it. If you look at the team that played at Luxembourg at the weekend, okay, you put a decent third midfielder in there. You would put Nico Schlotterbeck in there, perhaps next to Jonathan Tah. I think I would feel happier with that. But Voltemada's leading the line. There's no doubt about that. Maybe Gnabry goes forward and replaces Leroy Sané. Reasonable as he was one of the more reasonable players against Luxembourg. But look, for me, there's more holes in that team than Swiss cheese, and they're rampantly inconsistent, which is the issue.
Okay, listen, thank you very much indeed for that, Andy. Next, we're going to talk about one former winner of the tournament, Italy, and a team that has had several stabs. I think they've lost 3 finals now, haven't they? The Netherlands. Again, they're neither of them are quite qualified for the next World Cup. Italy next, and another astonishing performance by them tonight at home. That's coming up next here on Trans Europe Express. Yeah, listen, set your alarms for 6 a.m. tomorrow morning with Jeff Stelling and Gabby Bonlahor returning to the talkSPORT breakfast. They'll be joined by a brilliant lineup of guests as they look back on England's 2-0 win over Albania, with Harry Kane, of course, scoring both those goals. That's talkSPORT breakfast tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. Now, Andy, watching this World Cup qualification unfold, my favourite thing so far has been Norway. Watching Norway, a country of significant football background, but a small country, you could argue, watching them build their team to service Erling Haaland and watching him in form. It's incredible to me that Harry Kane, the form he's in, you can't even say he's the best centre forward in the world because of what Haaland is doing. So today, Italy take on Norway with no real chance, an outside chance. They have to thrash Norway to get through to the World Cup. World Cup, they haven't qualified for the last two, don't forget. But once again, Italy derailed and Norway absolutely magnificent.
And it's funny because this is the ultimate game of two halves, really. Italy started really well. They picked a really positive team. Rino Gattuso picked a really positive team. They take the lead fairly early on. Francesco Pio Esposito, who's looked brilliant really since the Club World Cup for Inter, came in to partner Matteo Retegui with Moise Kean not available. And there was so much to like about Italy in the first half. And then second half, Norway just showed who the best team in the group was, really. They did that so well. They worked and worked and worked. And when they got their equaliser, it was a brilliant goal by Antonio Nusa. They just unloaded on Italy from that point. Two in little over a minute from Erling Haaland, which took him up to 16 goals in 8 qualifying games. 16. It's remarkable. And then as you were reminding me of that great goal on the breakaway from Strand Larsen near the end, which I guess is good news for Wolves because he looked more himself in that little move than he's looked all season, really. And that he's maybe got the legs to get going in the Premier League again. But I think it was interesting hearing Gigi Donnarumma talk about it afterwards. He said it was unacceptable. His quote was, you can lose chances against a great side like Norway, but it's not possible that you just fall apart, that you totally lose confidence, totally lose control of the game. And that's exactly what happened, because when Norway sniffed blood, all of a sudden it was all done. And they were absolutely ruthless. And something you said to me, actually, when we were watching that game in our various spots, which really occurred to me. Look, I think Italy, on the balance of probability, depending on who they get in the playoff draw, will still make the World Cup.
Sure.
Clearly, there is a bit of anxiety around the fact that it will be the third successive time they didn't make the World Cup. And I can understand that. But if they take a deep breath, deal with it right, Gattuso shouts at them in the right places, I think they will make it. You look at the team that they put out tonight, which I don't think they can improve on that much, even given a couple of injuries. It's a pretty good team. It's a team that could probably see them to the last 16 in the World Cup. But Norway, it's funny, I've got the basketball on at the moment between the Clippers and the Celtics.
Of course you have.
And the Clippers have missed their moment, just in case you wondered. But back when they were good, when they were playing the NBA in the bubble at Disney, it was funny. They were a possibility to win the championship that year. And Luka Doncic, who is kind of like, I suppose, a basketballing Erling Haaland, like when he's on a fair wind, like forget it. It doesn't really matter what the team is around him or any of that. If he has his day, and they nearly beat the Clippers in that first round simply because Doncic unloaded on them all the time. And they're like, these guys aren't even better than us, but it's just this one guy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Haaland is like. On his day, outplay him all you like. It doesn't really matter. As you say, there will not be a better striker than him at the World Cup. Now, look, we've been fulsome in our praise of Harry Kane this season, and quite rightly so. But I think a friend who covers Bayern quite a lot pointed out to me a while back that when you see him doing all this brilliant stuff, and it goes back to, I guess, a criticism of him that's been in England for a while. Sometimes you just want him to stay in the slot. You just want him to stay in the number 9 slot. You know he can do all that other stuff. But I think you saw it a couple of times during this international break, and you certainly saw it a couple of times against Serbia, where he gets the ball in front of his penalty area and like, oh my God, he's a prince on the ball. And then you think, hang on, he's 32. He's not making it back to the penalty box by the time the ball gets up there, but by the time Bellingham or Rodgers or Saka has put it up there. With Haaland, you don't have that doubt, do you? Because you know he can make the run from the halfway line, and you know he's not spraying it about in front of his own penalty box as well. No. So I think on one hand, we can praise Harry Kane for everything he is and not want to change him. But we can also, I think, have a slight bit of trepidation about when we really need him. We need him to be the guy in that spot, to take that chance in that big game. And as you've always said, it's not what England do in qualifying or the group stage or any of that stuff that matters. It's when they get to the quarterfinal and play someone good. Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Netherlands, I suppose you could say that the draw in Poland's a decent result because it keeps them in control of their own fate in that group. They need 1 point to get at home to Lithuania. That will see them through. You tell me you watched the game that they weren't very good, partially because I'm always going on about the quality of their defenders, but the managers now decided that they don't need any help, those defenders.
Yeah, so it seems. Look, I know there's always identity politics in Dutch football. You know, what's the shape and what's the optimal shape and what should the optimal shape be? And that's always been a question in fitting in Xavi Simons, who didn't start this game, nor did Tijani Reinders, by the way, which also I find mad. Even though he's not been relentlessly consistent with Manchester City so far this season. So in the end, they play with the back four, who you know who it is, and they're really good. Yep. And then they play with two defensive midfielders. And in front of that, you have this front three of Memphis, Cody Gakpo and Daniel Marlon on the right-hand side with Justin Kluivert behind it. And what were we talking about earlier when we were talking about Julian Nagelsmann and that temptation to put one attacking player in too many? That's what it felt like for me. Where is the support for the defence? I don't care how good your defence is. The four of you can't do it on your own. Not in modern football. There's no way, especially against a decent side like Poland, who is one of those who will end up in the playoffs.
Yeah, Poland took the lead, and Memphis. We forget how many. I mean, he's now the record goal scorer for the Dutch. And I always say, if you think about the forward players Holland have paraded during my lifetime, it's almost incredible to me that he is their leading goal scorer. But there he is. He got the equaliser again. But overall, Andy, again, I'm asking you about these teams in relation to. Let's assume that the Netherlands will qualify. And Italy will probably be the strongest looking team in the playoffs, but neither threaten the World Cup in the summer.
No, I don't think so. And I do think with the Netherlands, they've got so many good players, but they've had their moment. Having one good sector of the team is just not enough. When you look at some of the teams out there, including the team that we're going to end up speaking about after the news.
Yeah, well, after the news, as Andy's referring to there, we will be doing Mbappe Watch, which will be turning over really to how France are getting on. And no spoilers, I will say that I'll be making the case that they, to me, look like the most complete group of players. They made, again, no spoilers for the next bit of the show, they made 11 changes between one match and the other and got the result they needed in both of them. And you could argue they've got another 11 outside of the squad that's currently there, who might make a very decent team in themselves. The French system produces just piles and piles and piles of footballers, and it is they that we will turn to next here on Trans Europe Express. After that, we'll also, during the next hour, be going back to the stories from around the leagues we normally cover, including huge stories taking place in Spain and elsewhere. That's all in this second hour of this later than usual edition of Trans Europe Express. We appreciate you've had to wait for a bit longer, and we understand that tonight's a school night as well. Stick with us while you can, though. We'll try and entertain and inform you as best we possibly can. You're listening to Andy Brassell and Danny Kelly here on Trans Europe Express.
Corinthian Casuals are a team in the Combined Counties League Premier Division South. Despite that, they're one of the most important clubs in world football. Here's why. The club was formed in 1939 as the result of a merger between Corinthians FC and Casuals FC. Now, Corinthians FC were founded in the late 1800s when the FA's top brass were sick of getting pumped by Scotland every time they played them. As a result, a man called Nicholas Lane Jackson set up an amateur side which would bring in the best players who could all play for the national side. And it worked. It wasn't long before England were dominating the international fixtures they played, and it was largely down to Corinthians. In fact, in 1894 and 1895, they played consecutive games where Corinthians provided the entire England 11. But the thing is, the players refused to play professional football. They didn't believe in it. They wanted to spread the values of sportsmanship, competition, and played for the love of the game. It also helped that most of the players were Oxbridge graduates who didn't need the money. But instead of entering the league and cup competitions, they played exhibition football and toured the world, bringing the beautiful game with them. And it was this which spread the game throughout the world and made it so popular. Most famously, in 1910, they travelled to Brazil. And the locals in Sao Paulo were so impressed, they started their own team under the same name. Yes, the same Corinthians who won the FIFA Club World Cup in 2021, one of the biggest football teams in Brazil. Now, they were global superstars, and despite not being professional, Corinthians drew in the crowds. Everybody wanted to play them, everybody wanted to watch them. So much so, they regularly played the winners of the FA Cup in what eventually became the Community Shield, winning most of the time. They actually inflicted Manchester United's worst defeat, 11-3, a record which still stands to this day. Now, fast forward to today, Corinthian Casuals still don't pay their staff or players. The ethos of sportsmanship is still at the heart of everything that they do. And even though they're a side in the lower leagues, if you make the trip to King George's Field in Tolworth just off the A3, you'll most likely bump into Brazilian Corinthians fans who often make the pilgrimage across the globe just to watch their founding team play.
Yeah, welcome back to the second hour of 3 of tonight's slightly later than usual edition of Trans Europe Express. I should warn you that in the coming weeks, keep an eye on Andy and I on Twitter, because the timings of the show are going to be moving around a little bit because of our coverage of the Ashes coming up. Can't wait for that to start Friday. Cannot wait. You're welcome, though, to Trans Europe Express. This hour, we've got stories from you from Spain, out with the World Cup qualifiers, Germany and Italy. These will include new owners for one of Europe's biggest clubs. It will include one of Europe's most volatile managers going on gardening leave, home working, something like that. And it will include a huge fine for an international footballer for possessing knuckle dusters and tasers. That's amazing enough lineup as it is, and it still leaves us time for this.
Carrière le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappé! Mbappé! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, it's 2-2! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de Kylian Mbappé. Allez, Kylian!
I think I broke all the radio rules there for forgetting to say the name of the programme. Just listen to Trans Europe Express. I'm Danny Kelly. He's Andy Brassell, and this is a sub-part of the programme, Mbappe Watch, which, Andy, this week, rather than focusing necessarily completely on the great man or Real Madrid, let's talk about France, my idea of the favourites for the World Cup, and perhaps to demonstrate both the talent available and the depth of that talent. They have played two completely different sides over this international break, literally 11 changes and won both games.
Yeah, that's right. It's remarkable, really. So they played their game on Thursday night against Spain, against Ukraine, at Parc des Princes, won 4-0. And then that obviously qualified them for the World Cup and gave them the latitude to make those 11 changes. Didier Deschamps, the latitude to make those 11 changes for the game in Baku today. Now, look, they were 1-0 down in the first 4 minutes, but came back strongly after those 11 changes. And I guess there are two ways of looking at it. Firstly, the fact that there's an extraordinary amount of depth, but also I think you can tell from the way they played the incredible eagerness of all of those players, because the players playing today, they're not all playing for places in the 11, they're playing for places in the squad. Because I think France, and when you've talked about their strength and their status as, if not the favourite, then very close to the favourite. I think what really makes that is the fact that they are in a position, as they are for many World Cups and European Championships, where we know that there are probably 35 players who've got a chance of getting in that squad, maybe more. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, Andy, what you say there, because the manager has been, he's not the most approachable, clubbable, smiley person. He's no Terry Venables, is he? And yet, despite occasionally causing a bit of a uproar within the squad, and we saw Antoine Griezmann depart from the squad because he wasn't made captain, he still found a way to make this huge group of players, as you say, incredibly enthusiastic about the prospect of wearing that blue shirt.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And what we've seen, really, I think, in the last little while as well, is that Kylian Mbappe has been a big part of that. Now, of course, in the first game, he got to 400 goals for club and country, which is remarkable at the age of 26. But
I was amazed when you landed that statistic on me like a cartoon anvil, and 2 hours ago, I was literally seeing those bluebirds and stars tweeting around my head. 400 goals. Wow,
yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is remarkable. But I think what he's done so well, actually, in recent months, and bear in mind that his reputation has taken a fair beating over the last few years. The public perception of him is that he's got better and better at captaincy, and I think really there was a good nod to that before the Ukraine game, the day before the Ukraine game, because he gave this speech before. Of course, you always have the captain give a press conference the day before the game, and he started it off with a quite clearly off the cuff, but very heartfelt, well-worded tribute to the victims of the Paris attacks, which was 10 years ago on the day of the Ukraine game. You know, something that had deeply affected not only all of France, of course, and all of French people, but actually those players. Remember, after that game against Germany, when suicide bombers tried to attack the game at the Stade de France, all those players were locked in for hours and hours, the French and German players. And if you go back, there were several reports about it in France this week. And what I hadn't realised is Antoine Griezmann's sister, who's now his agent and manager, she was at the show at the Bataclan that night that was attacked, and she lay on the floor playing dead to choose a moment to escape in that moment. And you go back and you look at the footage of that night from France, Germany, and the look on Griezmann's face where he starts to hear what's happened and realise that he doesn't know where his sister is, and fortunately she was fine, is something that's it's hard to get your head round. So I think for everyone to get their head in the game for qualifying for the World Cup, but to build on that and to continue the positive momentum was not easy this week. And I think when you look at how Mbappe judge the mood, judge the moment, and that he doesn't try and do it all on his own as a captain, I think that's very important, that he leans on the other guys. Now, Griezmann's not there to do it anymore, but Maignan there, Konate's there, Rabiot normally is there as well, and all these other players. I think that makes a massive difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, as you said, it wasn't scripted. It's something that he chose to do himself. The difference, as you say, between the two sides that played against, the two games over the last few days, is that the one against Ukraine in Paris is those who think they'll be in and around the starting 16. The others are people looking for a place in the squad. And of those, I suppose, the most high-profile beneficiary of the run-out was Ugo Ekitike.
Yeah, I think you can say that because he made a massive impact in the Ukraine game. So came on a sub against Ukraine, made a big difference. He started the game in Azerbaijan. Whereas you look at that on paper and you go, okay, Jean-Philippe Mateta scored, and look, I think he's in and around there, depending on who's available. I think, if nothing else, the form of Mateta, both domestically and when he's come into the France international team, not his first goal for France, of course, scored in Iceland in the last meetup, sort of put paid to like tentative talk after he came back to France of Olivier Giroud maybe going to the World Cup. Now that's not on anyone's mind. And that is the first battle that Mateta had to win. And he's done that very, very well. Ekitike is different because he is an astonishing all-round footballer, as I think we've already seen in the Premier League. But they can play him, even though he would prefer to play at centre-forward, slightly off the left as well. And then you get to the point where him and Mbappe can interchange during the game as well. Now, I guess the one thing that didn't really work this international break is the combination between Ryan Cherki and Michael Olise. Now, France were a bit stodgy when the two of those were on, to be honest. When Cherki, who's been in great form, of course, since coming back from injury, was taken off, and Ekitike came on, and Olise moved to the sort of number 10 role, then it started really rolling. And this is important as well because whatever, and there's no doubt that Cherki's going to be in the squad, fitness notwithstanding. We have to say that with everyone, with how many games they're playing, of course. Olise's form with France, the last couple of international windows, has not been great, and everyone loves him. France realised that he is a player that they've needed for a long time, but you've got to get the best out of him on a consistent basis, and that hasn't been the case so far. Once Cherki went off and he went into the centre, he really, really looked the part against Ukraine, and that's one of the huge takeaways from this as well.
Yeah, and Didier Deschamps questioned about, and I only know this because there's a Spurs connection here, Andy, because I look at all that stuff with the jeweler's eyepiece. Didier Deschamps questioned about the amount of players he had at his disposal for these two games, having made the 11 changes, was very quick to say, well, who knows what's going to happen between now and the World Cup. Some of these under 21 players, and then he actually... And it just seems a bit mad to me, he actually dropped Wilson Odebear's name. So maybe he was only joking. I don't know. Listen, an amazing qualification for France. And they've got all these players. I make them favourites for the World Cup, but I'm usually wrong about these things. We're going to take a break from talking about the World Cup now for an hour or so. We'll come back to it at about 20 to midnight when we'll go through more of the teams who have done well or have done badly. I'll be doing my nut about the Republic of Ireland. I think I would deserve that after 3 hours of broadcasting. But next up, we'll be going back to the big leagues that we normally cover. Even though there's been no games, except for FA Cup games in France, there's been huge stories breaking, not least in Spain, to where we travel next here on Trans-Europe Express. Right then, get ready to kick off 2026 in style as talkSPORT and our mates at Virgin Atlantic are giving you the chance to win an incredible trip for two to Las Vegas. You'll kick things off in style with exclusive access to the Virgin Atlantic Clubhouse at Heathrow, then fly in upper-class comfort with lie flat beds and premium service all the way to Vegas. Once you touch down, you'll check into a spa villa for 4 nights, cheer from the stands as the Las Vegas Raiders take on Kansas, and we're throwing in £5,000 worth of cash to play with while you're there. Clear your calendar, January the 2nd to the 7th, 2026, because this could be the greatest start to a new year you've ever had. Good luck, everyone.
21 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, text WIN to 83338. Text at £2 plus standard network rates. Bill payer's permission required. Or call 03434239761. Calls are charged at standard rate. All entries must be received by the 28th of November at 4 p.m. This is a network promotion. Run across talkSPORT, Virgin Radio UK and Talk. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Yeah, Spain now, and Andy, we'll get on in a few seconds' time to the news that one of the most important clubs in Spanish football has new owners. But first, it wouldn't be an international break, Andy, unless there was some conflict between Spain and its clubs over their players and the use of said players. Now, this happens to be about the best young player in the world and one of the biggest clubs in the world. This time it's Barcelona, Lamine Yamal, and the Spanish FA going at it.
Yeah, that's right. The Spanish FA were very unhappy, I guess counter-attacking or preemptively counter-attacking after Lamine Yamal was pulled out of the squad, saying they weren't being kept abreast of what was happening with him. Look, I think we've reached a point with club versus country where common sense is not really applied. There's not enough goodwill on both sides, and this is becoming an increasingly, whatever the FA we're talking about and whatever the club we're talking about, with the biggest clubs, there's not enough goodwill on either side really to have some sort of understanding of, you know, what might be a nice compromise that would work well for anyone. Because really, I don't think clubs, if they've got an injured player, should be sending them on international duty. But of course, it's not just the clubs that feel that their assets are being abused, and it's helping them or making them guard those assets a little more jealously. I think it's also the fact that countries or international associations are thinking, okay, well, we think you're not playing this straight, so we need to see them. I don't see how that's ever for the benefit of the player, really. An injured player to have to make an unnecessary journey. Sure. Of all the many things that could happen in this busy calendar to make things more difficult for a player, that's clearly one of them. I think is the case. Now, I think it's interesting that Luis de la Fuente, in the last couple of days, the coach of Spain, he's tried to sort of back away from what the RFEF said, tried to smooth it over, say, look, I want us all to be on the same page. We love Lamine. You know, his quote was an interesting one. After the Georgia game, he said, the relationship with all the clubs is wonderful, although everything can be improved. We are doing excellently and will continue to grow. The best news is he still has 15 years left than us. I don't know if he's trying to bait Barcelona by saying that, but well, I think it's something that's not going to go away in a hurry, and not just for Spain and Barcelona and Yamal.
You know what, Andy, as well as this, and I hate to be cynical about it, maybe it's not cynical, maybe it's questioning. Of course, part of this between the clubs, of course they want to protect their players. I get that. But there's also a financial thing going on here, isn't there, now? And the clubs have traditionally made loads and loads of money. And now they're seeing that using their players, the FIFA and UEFA are themselves becoming huge players. The contracts that FIFA have signed for the upcoming World Cup, for television, sponsorship, and all the rest of it. I wrote about it recently in a piece that I wrote. These are figures that we've never seen before. And the clubs will be going, hang on, so off the back of our players turning out for Spain, not the Spanish FA particularly, but UEFA or in this case FIFA, are making gigantic amounts of money. And of course, it's making them look askance at the whole thing. Sticking with money, Atletico Madrid, such a great club over the last 15, 20 years, certainly last 15 years, always been associated with the Hill family. Those of us of a certain vintage remember Jesus Hill as one of the most volatile owners in world football. Those days are behind them now, Andy. They've got new owners, an American investment group whose name you'll have to explain to me.
Yeah, Apollo Sports Capital,
Right.
who have come in and bought 55% of Atletico Madrid, so a controlling stake. That was announced this week, and it is been made clear though that Enrique Cerezo, the president, and Miguel Angel Gilmarin, who's the CEO, will be staying on for the next 3 to 4 years. So we're not even talking about handover yet. They're being left in control of the club for the moment to keep everything on an even keel, and so that means that, at least ostensibly, nothing changes. All they've really talked about so far is improvements in infrastructure, making the most of the fact that they've got a zone with a huge stadium where they could put more, I guess what the Brits would call enabling development around it, and more infrastructure, more entertainment options, all of those sort of things. Look, every games that they've played at the new Metropolitano since they've moved there, 5 years ago, they've put on massive happy hours. I mean, to me, that seems like madness, encouraging football fans to turn up 4 hours early and, drink until they've run out of money. But I mean, that has been their plan. I think they realise they need a slightly more sophisticated plan, especially to appeal to the international market now. Now, look, I guess the other thing is improvements to the training ground, moving on from there, the academy structure, all of those sort of things. Now, look, if you're an Atletico fan, clearly you're looking at it and thinking, okay, well, maybe we can compete for the best players in the world going on from there. Now, Atletico have been looking for this extra over-the-top investment for a little while. And, of course, they've had investment from international investment in minority shareholders from China and Israel before. This is different, though, because not only is it American venture capitalism, it is a sense that if we're going to really catch up with Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid, they've got so far off what Simeone has been able to do. What Simeone has been able to do in the last 14 years is absolutely astonishing. He really, almost alone, a little bit like Arsene Wenger, has made them into an elite club on his own. And off the back of that, of course, they've been able to go to the Metropolitano. They've been able to qualify for the Champions League. And, as I said on the Continent podcast in the week, the idea that anyone at Atletico could care less about the style of football when this guy delivers them to the Champions League every year, come what may, I think is a little bit laughable. But if we're talking about making them a world brand, then maybe that's something a little different. Now, look, they've been able to go out and spend a lot in the transfer market the last couple of summers. But there is no doubt that the team has come quicker than the team has gone further than the club in the last 14 years. And now it's time for the club to catch up. It's almost as if they're in an elite club seat, but they're not quite an elite club yet. And I guess that is the aim of the takeover, to take them to that point where they're actually an elite club rather than just playing at being one.
Yeah, and at the risk of people telling me to shut up about something I can't prove, yet another huge club in Europe taken up by American owners. I'm going to say it again, and of course, I'm absolutely happy to, in 3 years' time, to say, no, nothing happened, I was wrong. Something is going on in the background here about the way football is financed, played globally. Otherwise, I can't see how, particularly talking about increasing, Atletico's turnover by 40% in the foreseeable future. Something is happening, and we'll find out about it further down the line. Meanwhile, Andy, in a sort of comic moment in Spanish football this week, Luis Rubiales, unseated from office after he kissed without permission one of the Spain's female World Cup winners.
Jenny Hermoso, yeah.
Absolutely. he was at a book launch for his new book. Not only did something kind of comic happen to him, but it turned out to be the perpetrator was well known to him.
Yeah, that's right. He was egged at a book launch in Madrid. Now, look, I'm not going to be lining up to give compliments to Luis Rubiales here, but he was quite nimble, I think, in first pivoting, so it only hit him in the back, and then making his way off the stage without actually falling off it. But he claimed afterwards that the perpetrator was his uncle. Now, I think this is a suitably ridiculous end to what is a suitably ridiculous vanity project, even though this isn't the end of it. But the idea that the world needs a book of him going, poor me, at the end of an episode in which someone else was wronged, in which someone else was intimidated, I think beggars belief, really.
Well, Andy is just carrying on his what happened, and everyone have a view about that. If he had put his hands up and said, that happened, it was totally unacceptable, I apologise unreservedly, we might have got past all this, but his continued attempts to find angles whereby he's not to blame, and I presume the book is part of that, it means that, it's never going to go away for him. Maybe that's what he wants. I don't know.
The way he reacted said more about him than the actual action did, I thought.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're going to talk about Germany. Again, a stadium story that I'm really, really interested in. A double sacking at a big club, and we'll be talking about one of the more unusual fines for a footballer. All that's coming up when we get to the next section, which is about Germany. In the meanwhile, you're listening to me, Danny Kelly, him and Andy Brassell, and we are on Trans Europe Express. Yeah, we'll be taking you through till 1 o'clock this morning here on Trans Europe Express. So still plenty of time to talk about all the leagues. More big stories from across the world. Well, Tim Vickery will join us at midnight from South America, and we'll round up the other World Cup qualifying news, including the Republic of Ireland, in the last 20 minutes of the show. Andy, let's turn our attention then to Germany, where Wolfsburg have decided that one sacking is not enough and have got rid of the coach and the sporting director in one fell swoop.
Yeah, that's right. Perhaps not the biggest surprise that Paul Simonis, who in his first season as a top-level head coach last season, won the cup in the Netherlands with Go Ahead Eagles, which you have to say is A, brilliant, and B, an indication that it was going to go really badly at Wolfsburg. He got binned 10 games into the season. Sebastian Schintelos, who's the sporting director, he went as well. The CEO who signed Christian Eriksen, he might go. We'll have to wait and see. And so Wolfsburg are in a dreadful mess already at this point in the season. Haven't won a home game since going into last season. They're all over the place. But fortunately for them, one of the other clubs who are rather derided by German fans, Hoffenheim, who are doing really well at the moment. They're on the back of, 4 successive wins in the Bundesliga and pushing up to the European places. It's sort of in civil war behind the scenes. So if you look at where Schintelos has gone, they've already got a replacement lined up, and it's Hoffenheim's sporting director, Andreas Schicker, who's got other suitors, it has to be said, but it looks like Wolfsburg might be the one for him, because there is such a fallout. Of course, Dietmar Hopp, the software billionaire that really brought Hoffenheim to prominence, an old man now, but he has his advisor, Roger Wittmann, who was banned from the ground by the staff earlier this season because they didn't want the owner meddling and having his eyes in, which is really, really interesting. So that's how badly things are breaking down. And that's what's giving Schinker the opportunity to maybe test out other jobs rather than succumb to all the madness.
Okay, let's talk then about, and if you've ever been there, I think I speak as one who knows, the very fun city of Hamburg. San Pauli is one of the most interesting clubs in Europe. Of course, it prides itself on its progressive, some would say very left-wing politics. It's beautiful brown kit and much else besides. But Andy, if we're honest, it has lived out most of its life in the shadow of its near neighbours SV Hamburg. But St. Pauli have announced a plan to do something that could easily start to close that gap.
Yeah, it could. And it's interesting because the brand has always been bigger than Hamburg, even if the team and the club has been smaller, if that makes sense. As you say, they're the ultimate countercultural football club.
Their pirate flag and all that stuff. It's really good, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a unique experience going to Millantor. But what they've announced this week, and Uke Göttlich has been re-elected as for a final term as president. What they did earlier this year was really remarkable when they had a share issue to sell shares in the Millantor in the stadium, but sell them to their fans. So they raised 30 million euros whilst not going to the bank, which is really, really impressive. It was an incredible take up. Within the first month, they sold 20 million euros worth of shares and took it from there. But the next plan that Göttlich has is to expand the stadium, because it's almost impossible to get tickets at the moment. Now, one of the plans that they have is to make it up to 50,000, which is nearly as big as Hamburg Stadium, the Volkspark Stadium, which would be amazing. I don't know how that would work, but I mean, they've realised that they've got to do something because they're so far behind the eight ball. There are so many sponsors that they won't take, obviously, because they have a very, as you say, left-wing view of the world. So, they won't take betting sponsors, for example, lots of other investment that they won't take. They feel it's really important to make political decisions with their sponsorship. So they're going to, I presume, do some other type of share issue or something similar to raise the money for this. It's a sort of medium long-term project. But there are a couple of questions. Firstly, what will that do to the club culturally? Secondly,
soul is the question, isn't it?
Yeah, how will they maintain it in a guise that's still soulful? Because at the moment, it's kind of, I can't describe it to you if you haven't been there. Well, I can try. It's kind of like a clubhouse, really. It's a rickety old clubhouse, and it's all the better for it. Now, if you completely renovate it, make it almost twice as big, of course, you've got to try and maintain the atmosphere and how that is. And German clubs do that very well on the whole. We have to say that. But the other thing is, what happens while they're rebuilding it? Can they rebuild it a stand at a time? Well, I mean, they can't go and share with Hamburg because that completely destroys the match day experience. And they are all about the match day experience. This isn't like Spurs going to play at Wembley for a year and a bit, which was bad enough for Spurs fans.
Yeah,
I understand
it was.
that. I fully understand that. But the match day experience is everything that St. Pauli are about. So, look, they want to find an alternative way to do things is brilliant, but they have to find exactly the right tone. They have to strike the right tone and hit the right time scale as well.
Okay, talk to me about Karim Adeyemi. Of course, plays for Dortmund and has turned out in the last in this international window. He's German international as well, with his fabulous high hair. But he has received an enormous fine, Andy.
Yeah, so Julian Nagelsmann, who was hoping today to just be asked about, are you going to defend better? Are you going to play better than you did against Luxembourg? Are you going to avoid the temptation to play 7 up front, etc.? Was in fact faced with questions about Karim Adeyemi of Borussia Dortmund being fined €450,000 for illegal weapon possession. So he's reported to have had a knuckle duster and a taser in his house, which is completely off limits. The fine, a bit like when Marco Reus back in the day with Dortmund, when spent a couple of years driving without a driving license, tends to be related in federal German law to your earnings. So that explains the size of the fine. But Nagelsmann, quite wisely, in a world where everyone feels they should have an opinion about everything, said, you know what, I think this is a bit too big for me. And then just moved on from there. And I think that was entirely the right way to handle it. But I think it might affect Adeyemi going forward, because at the moment, him, Nico Schlotterbeck, they've got big decisions, Dortmund, to make on how they're going to, if they're going to extend them and how they're going to extend them. Apparently, both their agents would like buyout clauses in their contract, and Dortmund have always said, well, that makes you a hostage in any transfer negotiation, so we're not going to do that. But actually, the football world's changing, and I think if you're going to go all in on one, is no doubt Schlotterbeck. He's the leader, whereas Adeyemi, who's exceptional on his day, you wonder what his value really is in the open market. And it's not a question that I feel fully equipped to answer, to be honest, because
you're going Nagelsmann now on it.
Exactly. I am. Keep me back from that. But it'll be interesting to see how this plays into any negotiations.
Yeah, the only other story from Germany, I think we should mention, of course, we're coming up to the next transfer window. And it looks like Manchester City might be trying to get back their child superstar Claudio Echeverri from Leverkusen, simply not getting enough game time. There'll be a lot of that going on in leagues around Europe. We'll keep you across that, of course, when the transfer window opens in, what is it now, about 6 weeks' time, a little less. Thank you very much indeed for that, Andy. Next, we'll be going to Italy and trying to understand, once again, the working conditions and the workings of the mind of Antonio Conte. Yeah, we haven't given headlines to all the pieces today, but this section has got one. It says Conte staycation. Because, Andy, the low-level war, which Antonio Conte, of course, absolutely is an expert in, between himself and the owners at Napoli and the players at Napoli and anybody else who wants to pick a fight with him, is up and running, finally. With the result that he's been told to go home to Turin to chew things over. At least that's my reading of it. What exactly is happening here?
He's been allowed to go home to Turin because it's the international break. Obviously, with relations between Napoli and Juventus being as they are, the words home to Turin are probably quite alarm-laden for some. But I think given what happened after the defeat of Bologna last weekend and how Conte completely lost it, how we were having Aurelio De Laurentiis, the owner, saying, yes, well, me and Antonio Conte are meeting this week, but no, he's not resigning. Don't worry about that.
No.
That he should have to say that is a little bit of a concern. And so for me, it feels like there's quite a lot of good sense in it. So it's been seen as, Conte works from home, etc. He's been staying in touch with Christian Stellini by Zooming him like 3 or 4 times a day, sending detailed plans for training, letting Stellini deal with it, all that sort of stuff. But to me, it feels quite sensible, knowing how intense Conte is, knowing how intense Naples is, to step away from it a little bit and take a deep breath. Look, we all know that Napoli haven't played well recently, but let's look at the Serie A table. They're in 4th position at the moment. They're 2 points off the top. This is not... I don't think this is the most closed league in Europe, it's fair to say. It's also not comparable to going back 2 years where they were completely driving their title legacy into the ground. There are players to come back. There are fences to be mended, clearly. But there's definitely a path to progression, and there's definitely a path to them staying in the title race into spring.
But Andy, what would you say if I said to you that my experience, of course, he's managed the club I happen to support, is that once Conte crosses this mental bridge, there's never any coming back with him?
You could say that, but I think what's been notable about Conte at Napoli so far is all our tells have been wrong. And I think if we go back to last season, and everyone says with a couple of months left of the season, okay, De Laurentiis and Conte are clashing, this is where it falls apart. Whereas really, the remarkable thing was that it didn't happen sooner. Then you look at the final day after they've won the title, and everyone can see the fact that, when Conte gives a cuddle to De Laurentiis at the final whistle, it's as if, he's being made to cuddle a particularly beardy aunt at a family event. And you think, okay, it's all over. 3 days later, he's staying for this season.
Yeah.
So look, we all know that Antonio Conte is combustible. We all know he'll say things at regular intervals that most people would regret. However, I think the way that Aurelio De Laurentiis has managed this, we have to give him loads of credit for it. When Napoli last won the league and they lost Spalletti and they replaced him Pauli with Garcia, and then a string of other coaches, that was a mess with Calzona, with all of them. He has learnt from that. It's clear he's learnt from that. Now, on one hand, I think trying to please Conte all the time is a bit like chasing a losing bet. I think that is difficult. But on the other hand, I think you need someone in the situation, and it's unusual to find this at Napoli, to take a breath and be a bit sanguine about it. I wonder if De Laurentiis has become that, actually, because, like I said, in the cold light of day, they're nowhere near out of this title race.
No, they're not, though Antonio's already grim mood will not have been lightened by news of injuries on the international front.
No, and in fact, that's De Laurentiis' time to get properly angry. Now, of course, a couple of big African nations have fallen. Democratic Republic of Congo. Congratulations to them, by the way, for knocking out Nigeria on penalties
Extraordinary,
tonight.
yeah.
They'd knocked out Cameroon going back to Thursday. So incredible week for the Congolese. But during that game, Andre Frank Zambo-Anguissa, who, as I've said time and time again, is one of Napoli's absolute
Critical
best
to
players.
the project, yeah.
Yeah, he's out until 2026 now. Amir Rahmani, he got injured away with Albania. He will be out for a couple of weeks at least. It's expected as well. So a couple more to add to Rasmus Højlund, who Denmark are very much hoping will play in Glasgow against Scotland this week. Of course, De Bruyne, Lukaku, etc., etc., etc. So De Laurentiis was like quite angry about it, and he said, "Look, we can't keep having countries going back to what we were saying about Lamine Yamal earlier.
Exactly.
Just basically using our assets." And sending them back broken. This is something that's going to have to change. Now, interestingly, one of the suggestions that he had, well, I don't know if it was more of a demand than a suggestion, but he has said that what needs to happen is a sort of post-international window transfer window. So if you've got players who've been injured while away on international duty, you get the opportunity to replace them in a kind of mini transfer window. Now, I know, Danny, you're not a fan of the transfer window.
No, I do away with the whole blinking thing, yeah.
Yeah, but I do wonder if this has got some sort of legs. I mean, we have not an entirely similar thing, but not an entirely dissimilar thing in France at the moment. You have this thing called a medical joker. So outside the transfer window, if you as a Ligue 1 club have an injured player, you can sign outside the window, obviously free agents, but you can sign a contracted player from another French club to replace that injured player. So yeah. I wonder if something like that could evolve, because clearly, as we were talking about with the Yamal situation, because of the money involved, as you said, there's such enormous hostility between the clubs and the countries that it can't remain like it is. Something has to evolve.
No, it's too much bad faith now, isn't there? Every transaction is done. There's a lot of bad faith in it. Yeah. Of course, there are complications. You get a player in, then under those circumstances, the injured player recovers quicker than expected. What happens to the size of the squads, etc., etc. Now, Antonio Conte likes to give the impression that he's living, being a manager at 24/7, 365, heart and soul. Come on down, Spalletti, and how he's living at Juventus.
Yeah, he's literally living at the training ground. That's his plan. Now, look, we've had coaches do this before. We've had Luciano Spalletti do this before. Of course, he lived at the training ground for a bit when he was in charge of Napoli as well. Now, I guess the advantage is if you're completely bald, you're unlikely to come into training and people will look at your hair sticking up all over the place and go, oh, that guy looks like he's been sleeping in his car. So I think you're probably fine from that perspective. On the other hand, it does sort of reek a little bit of short-termism, because it's on one hand we think, he's super implicated, etc., etc., etc. On the other hand, it does recall to mind the fact that he's only contracted to the end of the season. And if what's the point of having a year's lease on a flat if you're going to be out in 8 months? I suppose.
I guess that's absolutely right, Andy. The success of Rasmus Højlund, relatively, certainly, and Marcus Rashford, very much so, has proven that Manchester United have talented forwards to spare who are perhaps not doing as well at Old Trafford as they would be perhaps elsewhere, which means that Roma, doing very well, joint top, but just no goal-scoring power at all, may be turning to that same source to try and solve that problem.
Yeah, so obviously increasing talk in the last week of Joshua Zirkzee maybe being the one for them. Apparently approved by Gianpiero Gasperini, who's already seen him be great in Serie A with Bologna. Although he's not the stone cold goal scorer that you would necessarily be looking for. He's very much a Gasperini kind of player, sort of versatile forward who can fit a number of positions, etc., etc., etc. But I don't think there's any easy answer to what Roma are going through at the moment. So, of course, you have Evan Ferguson coming in, not scoring yet, although showing a bit of promise, and then getting injured. I mean, ironically, if he'd have been fit, maybe Troy Parrott wouldn't have been in the team to score those goals against Portugal and
although
Hungary.
on form he had to be picked. You could say.
Yeah, certainly.
His form in Holland is better than what's going on in Roma.
Yeah, for sure. Although, as we've said, like literally no one is scoring for Roma. So you've got Paulo Dybala injured at the moment. You had the news this week that Artem Dovbyk is going to be out for a month as well, which is why he hasn't been on international duty with Ukraine. Of course, that they qualified for the World Cup playoffs this evening by beating Iceland. So there's a load of different issues there. Really, I mean, of course, none of these can be resolved before January. I mean, they could do with someone now. There's no doubt about that. This is a leap, and clearly it's not affordable. But Ademola Lookman, if he leaves Atalanta, would it be the weirdest thing ever if he showed up at Roma?
We shall watch that, Andy, with great care when this transfer window opens. We should end this section.
It can't happen, but
no, of course, yeah, but it's football. Money doesn't, levers, my friend, levers.
Yeah.
We should make the point as well that a man who's been through so many revolving doors this last calendar year, his head must be spinning. Ivan Juric has, yes, been sacked by Atalanta. You're listening to Transit Europe Express. We still have an hour to go. Next up, we'll be joined by Tim Vicky from South America. Much else besides as we head toward the finishing line at 1 a.m. here on talkSPORT.